Armstrong used an elaborate international blood transfusion scheme to cheat at bike racing. What's a conspiracy theory that later got proven to be true? Jeffrey Epstein was trafficking women and children for some very elite people on a Temple Island. Crazy but true. I remember reading that Hunter S. Thompson was working on the story of his lifetime, one that involved a child pedophilia ring that involved many of the world's most powerful people, and that it ran all the way up to the White House during the Bush Sr. administration. Before he could publish the story, he was found having committed suicide. Many of his friends and family had publicly questioned the suicide, in part because Thompson had said he was worried about being taken out in just such a way. I have a feeling that he was pulling on some threads that would have led to this whole Epstein ring. People forget that Thompson was an actual journalist. Project MKUltra. The CIA really was experimenting on unsuspecting citizens to determine the effects of LSD, specifically as relates to mind control. The LSD experiments were only a small part, and calling it to mind control kind of obfuscates what they were doing. The point of MKUltra was to understand the psychology and psychiatry of dogma, coercion, and loyalty. They also funded through grants a shocking number of landmark psychological studies. The point of the work was to look at what can make someone a double agent or a loyal operative, analyze which psychological levers encourage or mark that kind of person, and use that to help in an intelligence operation. Apple slows down older iPhones with software updates. They said it was to help reduce the load on the batteries as they lose performance with age, so a slower phone would make the batteries last longer. Not sure if legit or just taking advantage of that quirk in batteries and overestimating the benefit of their solution. Jimmy Savile being a pedophile. John Lydon from Sex Pistols even came forward in the 90s and spoke about it on the radio, 20 years before the public found out. Probably the most recent one that we didn't have enough time to label as a conspiracy theory was a couple of months ago. When AI firms started picking up anomalous spikes in pneumonia-related deaths and started talking about the fact that there is another, unknown pandemic going on that's killing people but mislabeled as pneumonia. The Bruce McArthur story is a weird one. For 7 years there was a conspiracy theory of a serial killer specifically targeting gay men around Toronto was floating around, but it could never be proven until eventually, enough evidence came up implicating him and he got caught in a sting operation. A rival of Thomas Jefferson revealed to the press that Jefferson had had an affair and several children with an enslaved person he owned, Sally Hemings, who was actually his late wife's half-sister. It was adamantly denied by the Jefferson family and historic foundations until recent DNA testing revealed it had been true. That we've had a female president before. There was a theory that Roosevelt was ill and bedridden for the latter part of his second term in office and that his wife was secretly running the show, making most of the decisions. Turns out it was true. Many people who were part of Roosevelt's staff at the time admitted it years later. The Epstein case really opened the door to conspiracies for me. I lost all trust in our government. Like this man had dirt on tons of high-level politicians and celebrities and magically kills himself before he has to testify? And nobody seems to be aggressively getting to the bottom of it? He was running child sex rings with world leaders. What the actual fuck? Why are we not up in arms over this? What's also shocking to me is how little the media covered it and how it's pretty much already blown over. What else has the government covered up? A lot of Bernie Madoff's investors knew his fund was a scam. He had plenty of hedge fund quants and other sophisticated clients who understood there's no honest way to consistently outperform the market. They knew that a fund taking aggressive risks might beat the market most years, but it'll be up and down, some years way up, a few years flat. Nobody just churns out 11% can guarantee above market gains year after year. Not honestly, anyway. But they were wrong was what kind of scam Madoff was running. They assumed he was hooked up with an insider trading scheme. Somebody inside Apple, GM, GE and C. was leaking quarterly earnings figures to him a week before they were publicly announced, letting him load up, or dump, stock before the market reacted. Instead of blowing the whistle, these guys all bought into the scam. Of course, as it turns out, Madoff was just running a traditional Ponzi scheme. Use new investors' deposits to pay out all the withdrawals, then steal whatever's left over. And if you're claiming 11% returns, deposits are going to vastly outnumber withdrawals. I feel bad for his true victims, but a lot of the investors he ripped off could better be described as co-conspirators. That China harvests organs from their prisoners. The first rumors came out in the early 2000s, but everyone dismissed it since it came from Falun Gong practitioners, which were like a Chinese Buddhist cult. If you lived in any major city, you'd see them passing out flyers and protesting in front of Chinese embassies, and no one believed them. 20 years later, we all know it to be true. It may seem unthinkable now, but just a few decades ago the idea that the Catholic Church was knowingly harboring pedophiles among its ranks, and would move those child molesters to different locations with fresh victims. When the people at their current location became suspicious, it was thought to be a conspiracy theory only believed by total tinfoil hat nutcases. Shame, it turned out to be horribly true. And the Catholic Church still hasn't cleaned up their act. If the choir boys are in less danger now, it's not because the church has cracked down on the predators, it's because normal people now know not to leave their kid alone with Father McFeely. The Lincoln assassination. That was a true conspiracy, with shadowy meetings and plans and everything. Besides Lincoln, they planned to kill the VP Johnson and Secretary of State Seward. Unlike movie conspirators, most of these guys were dolts. The VP assassin chickened out. Seward's would-be assassin succeeded in seriously wounding him but failed to kill him. JWB succeeded but was caught and killed a couple of weeks later. They were all rounded up, and in the heat of the times were executed. Even Mary Surratt, who owned the boarding house where they met, was hanged. The doctor who set Booth's leg, broken during the escape, got 20 years in prison. People don't think of it as a classic conspiracy, because there wasn't a government or state-sponsored hand behind it. Try as they might, the feds could never find any proof that the Confederate leadership had anything to do with it. But it was a conspiracy nonetheless. No one gonna bring up Operation Sea Spray? The Navy was testing bacterial weaponry in 1950 in San Francisco. They released pathogens off the shore and calculated that there was enough for the whole population to get a dose. Caused a spike in urinary tract infections and a guy died. CIA was responsible for the death of nuclear physicist Homi Bhabha, who wanted to extract India's thorium reserves to create the nation's three-stage nuclear power program. A journalist who taped interviews with a former CIA operative, Robert Crowley Talks, later made this public. There was an old conspiracy theory that during Prohibition the government was poisoning alcohol to prevent people from drinking, and even up the strength of the poison. Apparently, 10,000 people died. They still do the exact same thing as rubbing alcohol by dosing it with methanol. It's the reason why bad moonshine can kill you if it's distilled improperly. There was a conspiracy that used to go around that a bunch of politicians, business owners, and actors spend 2 weeks in the California woods having orgies and sacrificing children. It was sometime between 1999 and 2001, but Alex Jones, who at the time was new to the reporting world, contacted the BBC and told them he wanted to prove that conspiracy. They sent him a BBC reporter and a camera, and they snuck into the supposed camp and captured footage of actors and politicians camping out together and burning child effigies in front of a giant owl statue. After 9/11 though, the shock factor quickly got tossed to the wind. But it was still proved, still happens, and there's still footage of the cremation of care ceremony at Bohemian Grove. One that got proven false was the Rosenbergs were falsely accused, which was a subject of many documentaries in the 70s and 80s. After the fall of the USSR, it was proven they were spies. To be clear, Julius was a spy. Ethel was innocent, and the government knew it. The government charged her anyway to pressure Julius into confessing. There's a lot of interesting history to the story. Julius got caught basically because a stupid Russian spy reused a one-time pad. Concentration camps. There were several reports to Allied governments about them. No one believed it until the US Army started liberating them, at least the scale of it. How has the leaded gas conspiracy not been mentioned? The US government and powerful lobbies denied leaded gasoline was affecting society for decades. Drops in violent crime exactly follow the reduction in the use of leaded gasoline across multiple countries. This one is in the works right now. Here is what the government is currently doing to enrich themselves while stealing about $1 trillion in tax money from us and funneling it through new private companies. Blue Flame Medical. In LA and all over the country, FEMA is going to hospitals and chasing medical supplies, like a full-on government raid to take the supplies back. FEMA representatives said the agency, working with the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Defense, has developed a system for identifying needed supplies from vendors and distributing them equitably. This will have zero transparency, guaranteed. They're just funneling it through Kushner's 3-week-old shell company for massive profiteering. The Trump administration and the GOP would have us get sick and die while they profit off of tax dollars. Here is how it works with sources for each step. I wish I was crazy and this was a hair-brained conspiracy. It looks like it's real. 1. Eliminate oversight of the spending of nearly $1 trillion of tax dollars. 2. Acquire the authority to command which businesses get which contracts. 3. Have trusted people stand up companies through which the money can be funneled. 3-week-old company, founded through a loan approved via the coronavirus stimulus bill, is now the center of medical supply distribution. 4. Have the federal government sell, at a reduced price, its strategic stockpile to the new companies, run by your buddies. 5. Have the states bid on the supplies, driving up the price. 6. Have the federal government spend taxpayer dollars to ship supplies purchased from China to these brand new private companies. 7. Eliminate the competition. Attack any company that doesn't play ball. Mass surveillance by the US government used to be a crackpot theory until Snowden revealed it was actually true, and the NSA were doing just that. During the Cold War there was a commercial which is showing how to dig a foxhole/shelter in case of a nuclear attack. Commercial made by the US government. Later it's proven by CIA documents that the government didn't want to deal with dead bodies aftermath of a nuclear attack. So the purpose of the commercial was to make citizens to dig their own grave. Thank you for watching Reddit Space. Please subscribe if you love these Reddit stories.